We're at my mother's birthday party. If she dies, let me know later. Those were the cruel words my daughter-in-law said, blunt, emotionless, echoing from my son's phone on speaker while I lay in the emergency room. No hesitation. No hint of concern. While my body was shattered from the accident, and each breath came out as a faint groan, my son and daughter-in-law were somewhere upscale, raising their glasses to celebrate her mother's birthday. My name is Catherine, and this is the story of a woman who lost every ounce of her dignity until the day she decided to take it all back. Just 15 minutes before the truck slammed into me, I was still standing, trembling, on the front porch of my son's house. Today was her mother's birthday, my daughter-in-law's mother. I wore my old beige cardigan, the warmest one I owned, and clutched a vanilla sponge cake I had spent 3 hours baking. I had hoped to see my family smiling, laughing. I had hoped to feel welcome. I didn't even make it past the threshold. Jessica, my daughter-in-law, had blocked the door, her eyes scanning my outfit with undisguised disgust. "Go home, Catherine. You look like a charity case. Don't embarrass us in front of the mayor." The door had slammed shut, severing me from the warmth, from the laughter, from my family. Driven by humiliation and a trembling grief, I had fled. I didn't see the red light. I didn't see the truck, just a flash of chrome, a deafening crunch of metal, and the world spinning into darkness. "Catherine! Catherine, stay with us!" I gasped, sucking in air that smelled of rubbing alcohol and blood. The light above was blinding, searing through my eyelids. My body felt heavy, as if I were trapped under a pile of wet sandbags. "Stabilize her neck. BP is 80/50 and dropping." I knew that voice. Alan. Dr. Alan Sterling. My late husband's golf partner. "Alan," I croaked, the taste of copper filling my mouth. "Robert. Call Robert. My son." He needed to know. He would come. He had to. "We're on it, Catherine. Don't speak." Alan's face loomed over me, pale and grim. He nodded to a nurse holding a cell phone. "Speaker. Now." The room was a symphony of chaos, machines beeping, gurneys rolling, nurses shouting orders. But when the phone began to ring, everything else seemed to fade into the background. Re-eyeing. "Come on, pick up," Alan muttered, his hands working quickly to secure an IV line in my arm. Click. Robert Vance's phone. A woman's voice answered. "Jessica. This is Dr. Alan Sterling from Greenwich Hospital," Alan barked, wasting no time on pleasantries. "I have Catherine Vance here. Severe collision. Critical condition. She is asking for her son. We need you here. Now." I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the cracks, waiting for the panic in her voice, waiting for the sound of Robert grabbing the phone. Instead, I heard jazz music, the clinking of crystal glasses, the murmur of a polite crowd. "Dr. Sterling?" Jessica's voice was crisp, annoyed, as if a telemarketer had interrupted her dinner. "Look, we are in the middle of a toast. It's my mother's birthday. The governor is literally standing next to me." "Mrs. Vance," Alan's voice dropped an octave, trembling with suppressed rage. "Did you hear me? Your mother-in-law could die." Time stopped. The beeping of my heart monitor seemed to slow down, sinking with a terrified thudding in my chest. Then came the answer. The sentence that would kill Catherine Vance more effectively than any car crash ever could. "Oh, for God's sake," Jessica sighed. I could hear the eye roll in her tone. "That old woman always has to be the center of attention, doesn't she? Look, Robert is busy. We can't leave right now. If she dies, just let us know later. We'll send the lawyer to handle the body tomorrow." Click. The line went dead. Silence. The emergency room was still bustling, but for me, the world had gone utterly silent. The physical pain, the broken ribs, the shattered glass in my skin, vanished. It was replaced by a coldness so absolute it felt like rigor mortis setting in while I was still alive. I wasn't a mother. I wasn't a grandmother. To them, I was just expiring inventory. A tear slid down my temple, pooling in my ear. It was the last tear I would shed for them. Dr. Allen lowered the phone slowly. He looked at the nurse, then down at me. His eyes, usually so kind, were now burning with a fierce protective anger. He stopped working on the IV for a split second, gripping my hand tight. "You heard that, didn't you?" he whispered. I didn't speak. I couldn't. I just stared at him, my vision clearing, the fog of shock lifting to reveal a razor-sharp clarity. Alan leaned closer, his voice low, cutting through the noise of the trauma bay like a scalpel. "Fight this, Catherine. You have to live." He reached over and switched off the speakerphone, tossing it onto a tray with a metallic clatter. "Because when you wake up, it's time to show them exactly who pays for their champagne and caviar." I closed my eyes. The darkness returned. But this time, it wasn't scary. It was a shield. "Yes," I thought, as the anesthesia pulled me under. "Tell them later. But tell them. The landlord is coming to collect." The bright lights of the trauma bay began to blur. They didn't fade into darkness, not yet. Instead, they swirled into a fog, a gray mist that carried me backward. Time is a funny thing. When you think you might die, you don't see a tunnel of light. You see the mistakes. You see the crossroads where you turned left when you should have turned right. I was floating. Dr. Allen's voice became a distant hum. The sterile smell of the hospital dissolved, replaced by the scent of old leather and cigar smoke. I was back in the library of our old estate. It was 20 years ago. It was raining that day. The day I signed the papers. William had been gone for only a month. The cancer took him fast, leaving me with a hole in my chest and a multi-million-dollar corporation, Vance Holdings, that needed a leader. Robert was 25 then. He was handsome, grieving, and lost. I looked at him and saw a boy who needed a purpose. I saw a son who needed to feel like a man, not just the heir to a fortune. So, I made the decision. The decision that brought me to this cold hospital bed. I sat across from Arthur Sterling, Alan's father. He was our family attorney then, a man of iron principles and few words. The family trust documents lay between us like a dividing line. "Catherine," Arthur had said. He didn't pick up his pen. He just looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "You are giving him voting rights. You are making him the face of the company. You are stepping back into a purely advisory role with no public title." "He needs this, Arthur," I had argued. My voice was softer back then, naive. "He needs to feel that he earned it. If I stay as CEO, he will always be William's son. I want him to be Robert Vance." Arthur leaned forward. I could still see the deep lines on his forehead. "Power is not a gift, Catherine. It is a test," he said. His voice was grave. "If you hand a kingdom to a boy who has never plowed a field, he won't understand the value of the harvest. He will only understand the power of the whip." I didn't listen. I signed. I signed away my visibility. I kept the majority shares, yes. I controlled the purse strings, technically. But I gave Robert the title. I gave him the office with the view of the Manhattan skyline. I gave him the credit for every deal I quietly orchestrated from my home office. I thought I was being a good mother. I thought I was being noble. I drifted further into the memory. The years flashed by like pages in a flipbook. I saw the first Christmas party after Robert married Jessica. I had knitted a scarf for Robert. It was cashmere, a deep charcoal gray. It took me 3 weeks. When I gave it to him, he smiled, a thin, polite smile. "Thanks, Mom," he said. He didn't put it on. Later that night, I found it in the coat check room, stuffed behind a pile of guests' umbrellas. When I asked him about it days later, Jessica answered. "Oh, Catherine," she laughed, sipping her mimosa. "Robbie can't wear homemade things to meetings. It looks desperate. We donated it to the shelter. Someone needy will appreciate it more." I didn't get angry. I swallowed the lump in my throat. I told myself they were right. I was old-fashioned. They were the modern power couple. I needed to adapt. I needed to be smaller, so I shrank. I shrank until I was just a ghost in my own family. I paid for the weddings. I paid for the vacations to the Hamptons. I paid for the cars. But I was never invited to ride in them. "Mom, you wouldn't enjoy the gala," Robert told me 5 years ago. "It's loud. It's for young people. Stay home, rest." I stayed home. I rested. I waited for a phone call that never came. Every time they disrespected me, I made an excuse. Stress, I thought. Ambition, I told myself. But lying here, with my ribs broken, and my heart shattered by that phone call, the excuses died. Arthur Sterling was right. I hadn't raised a son. I had raised a parasite. I remembered the look on Robert's face when I funded his first failed venture without asking a single question. Relief? No. Entitlement. He didn't say, Thank you. He said, finally. I had taught him that my love was a currency he could spend without limit. I had taught him that my dignity was a doormat he could wipe his designer shoes on. The darkness of the anesthesia began to pull at me, heavy and irresistible like a black tide. It's my fault, I thought. The realization was more painful than the surgery to come. I created this. I handed him the knife, and I sharpened it every time I stayed silent. But regret is a useless emotion unless it fuels change. The beeping of the monitor slowed down. Beep! Beep! My body was going to sleep. But deep inside, in the cold, dark cellar of my soul, something was waking up. The Catherine, who baked cakes and waited by the phone. She was dying on this table. The Catherine who signed those papers 20 years ago? She was gone. Mrs. Vance, count backward from 10, the anesthesiologist said softly. 10, I whispered, in my mind. I am not just a mother. 9. I am the chairman of the board. 8. I am the one who built the castle they live in. 7. The last thing I saw before the blackness swallowed me was the image of Arthur Sterling. He wasn't frowning anymore. He was nodding. If you survive this, the darkness seemed to whisper, you don't go back to the porch, you kick down the door. 6. I let go. I let the darkness take me. Because I knew that when I returned, I wouldn't come back as the victim. I would come back as the lesson they never learned. 3 days. 72 hours. That is exactly 4,320 minutes. I counted them. Not consciously, perhaps, but my body kept score. Each minute was a drop of saline in the IV drip. Each hour was the changing of the shift nurses. Each day was a cycle of light and dark that passed without meaning. When I finally clawed my way back from the depths of unconsciousness, the silence was the first thing that greeted me. It wasn't a peaceful silence. It was a void. A heavy, suffocating emptiness that pressed against my eardrums. I opened my eyes. The room was stark white, sterile, impersonal. I lay there for a long time, just listening. I listened for the sound of familiar footsteps, the heavy, confident stride of my son, Robert. I listened for the click-clack of Jessica's high heels, a sound I usually dreaded but now, strangely, hoped for. Even her sharp criticism would have been a sign of presence. But there was nothing. I turned my head. The movement sent a jolt of sharp pain shooting down my neck, a reminder of the airbag's brutal impact. I winced, waiting for the wave of dizziness to pass. I looked at the plastic guest chair in the corner. It was pushed neatly against the wall, empty. No coat draped over the back. No half-drunk coffee cup on the side table. No crumpled magazines. It looked like no one had ever sat there. Because no one had. A nurse bustled in, checking the monitors with practiced efficiency. Her name tag read Sarah. She offered me a tentative smile, the kind you give to patients who have no visitors. Welcome back, Mrs. Vance, she said softly. How is the pain? Manageable, I lied. The physical pain was nothing compared to the ache in my chest that had nothing to do with broken ribs. How long have I been out? 3 days. You had a severe concussion and some internal bleeding, but you're stable now. Dr. Allen was very worried. Dr. Allen, I repeated. Has anyone else been here? Sarah hesitated. She fiddled with the tubing of my IV, her eyes avoiding mine. We called the contact numbers you had on file, ma'am. We left several messages. And we haven't heard back yet. But maybe they're just busy. Or maybe the reception is bad. Her excuses were kind, but they were thin, they were transparent. Thank you, Sarah, I whispered. Can I get you anything? Some ice chips? Jello? I need my phone, I said. My voice surprised me. It was weak, yes, rasping like dry leaves, but there was a steel core to it. And I need the hospital administration forms. The privacy release documents. Sarah looked confused. The HIPAA forms? We usually handle that with family. Bring them, I interrupted. I need to update my list of authorized visitors. She nodded and hurried out, sensing the shift in the room's atmosphere. I gripped the cold metal railing of the bed. I needed to do this. I needed to hear his voice. I needed to confirm what my heart already knew, but my mind refused to accept. I dialed Robert's number. My fingers felt clumsy, heavy as lead. Ring, ring, ring. My heart hammered against my bruised ribs. Pick up, I prayed. Please, Robert. Just pick up and tell me you're on your way. Tell me you've been frantic. Tell me anything. Hello. Robert's voice. Breathless. Robert? I said. Mom? There was a pause. A beat of hesitation. Oh, hey. The hospital called. They said you woke up. That's great news. Great news. As if I had won a raffle ticket. Where are you? I asked. Me? Oh, God, Mom, it's crazy right now, he said, rushing the words. I'm in the middle of a strategy meeting for the merger. You know, the one with the tech group? It's chaotic here. People running everywhere. I closed my eyes. The merger. The tech group. I still read the board reports. I knew every deal Vance Holdings was involved in. There was no merger. There was no meeting. And then I heard it. The sound was faint, carried over the line by a gust of wind. Thwack, a clean, crisp sound. It was the sound of a driver hitting a golf ball. Nice shot, Bob. A distant voice cheered in the background. My son wasn't in a boardroom. He was on the 14th hole at the country club. A meeting, I repeated, my voice flat. Yeah, sorry, it's super loud. He lied effortlessly. Look, Jessica is really stressed about everything. The accident, the car, it's a lot for her. We're thinking we'll try to swing by next week, when things calm down. Once you're moved out of the ICU and looking a bit more presentable, you understand, right? Next week. I was lying in a hospital bed, my body broken, stitched together by strangers, and my own flesh and blood couldn't spare an hour. He couldn't even spare the truth. I understand, I said. Great. I knew you would. You're tough, Mom. You always bounce back. Anyway, I gotta go. The CEO is waving at me. Goodbye, Robert. I didn't wait for his reply. I pulled the phone away from my ear and pressed the red button. The line went dead, and with it, the last tether snap. I lay back against the pillows, staring at the ceiling. I expected to cry. I waited for the tears, the sobbing, the hysterical grief of a mother betrayed. But they didn't come. Instead, a strange sensation washed over me. It started in my fingertips and spread to my chest. It was cold. It was calm. It was the absolute terrifying clarity of a person who has nothing left to lose. I was done. I was done making excuses for his selfishness. I was done apologizing for my existence. I was done being the silent partner in my own life. Sarah walked back in with a clipboard. Here are the forms, Mrs. Vance. I took the pen. My hand was steady now. I want you to write this down, I said, looking Sarah in the eye. Robert Vance and Jessica Vance are to be placed on the Do Not Admit list. Effective immediately. Sarah's eyes widened. Your son, ma'am? They are not to cross the threshold of this room. If they call, you tell them I am unavailable. You give them no updates on my condition. No vitals, no prognosis, nothing. Is that clear? Yes. Yes, ma'am. And who is your emergency contact? Dr. Alan Sterling. And my attorney. I signed the paper with a flourish, the pen scratching loud and harsh against the paper. It felt like signing a Declaration of Independence. I picked up the phone again. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years, but one I knew by heart. Sterling, Miller and Associates. Law offices. Put me through to Arthur Sterling, I said. I'm sorry, Mr. Sterling is currently in court. This is Catherine Vance. I cut her off. My voice was no longer the voice of a lonely widow. It was the voice of the majority shareholder of a multi-million-dollar empire. Interrupt him. Tell him to get out of court. Tell him to bring the full forensic accounting team. And tell him to meet me at Greenwich Hospital. Now. There was a stunned silence on the other end. Yes, Mrs. Vance. Right away, I hung up the phone and placed it gently on the table. The pain in my ribs was a dull fire, but inside, I felt a surge of adrenaline I hadn't felt in 20 years. This wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was a hostile takeover. I looked at the empty chair one last time. You wanted the company, Robert? I thought. You wanted the lifestyle? You wanted the title? Fine. You can have them. But you forgot one thing. You forgot who owns the ground you walk on. And the landlord is coming to collect. Now, I have to stop and ask you something. Truly ask you. Imagine you are lying in a hospital bed, hovering between life and death. Your body is broken, you are alone, and your child, the person you fed, clothed, educated, and handed a fortune to, can't be bothered to visit. Instead, he lies to you from a golf course. I made a decision in that moment. A hard decision. I decided to cut them off completely. No access, no information, just silence. Some people might say I'm being cruel. A mother should always forgive, right? A mother should always be the bigger person. But tell me, is my action too ruthless? Or is it the only way to finally demand the respect I deserve? If you were in that bed, staring at that empty chair, would you have done the same? Let me know your thoughts. Hope is a dangerous thing. It is the last thing to die, and often, it is the thing that kills you. Even after 3 days of silence, even after the golf course phone call, there was still a tiny, foolish part of me, the part that remembered Robert as a toddler clutching my leg, that whispered, maybe there is a reason. Maybe he is just overwhelmed. Maybe, if it really mattered, he would step up. I needed to kill that whisper. Or I needed it to be true. Are you sure about this, Catherine? Arthur Sterling stood by the window of my hospital room. He looked older than I remembered, his gray suit immaculate, his face etched with a kind of worry that lawyers usually hide behind a billable smile. Do it, I said. My voice was steady, but my hands, hidden under the white blanket, were clenched into fists. Arthur nodded to the nurse, Sarah. We had rehearsed this. It was a test. A cruel test, perhaps, but necessary. Sarah picked up the room phone. She dialed Robert's number. She put it on speaker. The ringtone echoed in the sterile room. 1, 2, 3. Robert Vance, he answered. He sounded breathless again, but this time it wasn't the wind of a golf course. It was the background noise of a high-end restaurant. Clinking silverware. Low jazz. Mr. Vance, Sarah began, her voice professional and apologetic. This is the billing department at Greenwich Hospital. I'm calling regarding your mother, Catherine Vance. Is she dead? He asked. The question hung in the air. Not is she okay? Not what happened. Just, is she dead? Like checking the status of a stock trade. No, sir. She is stable, Sarah said, glancing at me. I didn't blink. However, we have encountered a significant issue with her insurance coverage. There seems to be a lapse in the primary policy. Given the complexity of her upcoming surgeries, the hospital requires a good faith deposit to proceed with the next round of treatment. A deposit? Robert's voice sharpened. The smooth, charming CEO persona dropped instantly. What kind of deposit? We need an immediate transfer of $50,000, sir. Just to cover the operating theater costs until the insurance dispute is resolved. $50,000. For Robert, that was a weekend in Vegas. It was a down payment on a new Porsche. It was less than what Jessica spent on her spring wardrobe. I held my breath. Please, I begged silently. Please say yes. Say you'll wire it. Say money is no object. Show me I'm wrong about you. There was a pause. I heard him sigh, a long, dramatic exhalation of annoyance. 50 grand? Right now? Robert laughed, a harsh barking sound. You have got to be kidding me. Look, can't you just bill us later? Or put it on a payment plan? I'm afraid not, sir. It's hospital policy for uncovered procedures. Without the funds, we may have to delay the surgery. Well, then delay it, Robert snapped. Jesus. Do you know how much cash Jessica has burned through this month? She just had to have that renovation done on the pool house. We are liquid poor right now. I can't just conjure 50 grand out of thin air because the insurance company screwed up. Liquid poor. Sir, Sarah pressed, this is for your mother's health. My mother has assets, Robert said, his voice dripping with irritation. She has her own accounts. Use those. Why are you calling me? I'm in the middle of a dinner with investors. I can't deal with this nickel-and-dime administrative incompetence. Figure it out. Click. The line went dead. The silence that followed was different from before. It wasn't empty. It was heavy. It crushed the air out of the room. Robert hadn't just refused. He hadn't even hesitated. He didn't ask if the delay would hurt me. He didn't offer to call the bank. He blamed his wife, pleaded poverty while dining at a 5-star restaurant, and hung up. I looked at the phone. The tiny foolish whisper in my heart didn't scream. It simply vanished. It was as if someone had reached into my chest and flipped a switch. The lights went out, the warmth evaporated. Catherine? Arthur took a step toward the bed. I'm fine, I said. And I was. I was terrified by how fine I was. I felt nothing. No pain, no sadness. Just a cold, crystal-clear understanding of reality. Show me the rest, Arthur, I commanded. Arthur hesitated, then opened his leather briefcase. He pulled out a thick stack of documents. They were bound with a heavy clip. The cover read, Internal Audit, Vance Holdings, Incidental Expenses. You asked us to look into the discretionary spending, Arthur said, his voice low. When we saw the activity on the company credit cards, we dug deeper. We found irregularities. Significant ones. He handed me the file. I opened it. The pages were filled with rows of numbers, dates, and merchants. My eyes scanned the lines. May 12, Barney's, New York, $14,500. Listed as office supplies. June 3, The Ritz-Carlton, Paris, $22,000. Listed as client acquisition meeting. July 15, Mercedes-Benz dealership, down payment, $15,000. Listed as fleet maintenance, page after page. Jessica has a supplementary card, Arthur explained, pointing to a column. Authorized by the CEO. That's Robert. Every single one of these charges was approved by his digital signature. I turned the page. August 20, Emerald Spa and Wellness, $4,200. Listed as employee health benefit. September 10, private aviation charter to Aspen, $35,000. Listed as logistics survey. I looked up at the ceiling. I remembered September. That was when I had asked Robert for help repairing the roof of my house. The leak was ruining the guest bedroom. We're tight on cash, Mom, he had told me. The market is down. You should just put a bucket under it for now. He told me to put a bucket under a leak while they flew a private jet to Aspen. My hand didn't shake as I turned the pages. I felt like a coroner performing an autopsy. The body on the table wasn't a person. It was my relationship with my son. And the cause of death was right here. Printed in black and red ink. How much? I asked. In the last 18 months? Arthur adjusted his glasses. Just under $400,000. Embezzled directly from the company operating budget to fund their personal lifestyle. $400,000. Stolen. Not borrowed, stolen. From the company William and I built from the ground up, from the company that paid for the roof over their heads. And the taxes? I asked. They wrote it all off as business expenses, Arthur said grimly. If the IRS looks at this, Catherine, Vance Holdings could be fined millions. Robert could go to prison for tax fraud. I looked at the signature at the bottom of the invoice. Robert W. Vance. The loops of his handwriting were arrogant, large, taking up more space than necessary. I remembered teaching him to write his name. I remembered holding his small hand, guiding the pencil. I closed the file. The sound was sharp. Final. He didn't just abandon me, Arthur, I said softly. He robbed me. Yes, Arthur replied. He did. I looked out the window. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the hospital parking lot. Somewhere out there, Robert and Jessica were finishing their expensive dinner, charging it to a company they didn't own, complaining about the burden of a mother who refused to die conveniently. The pain was gone. The mother was gone. Arthur, I said. I turned to look at my old friend. My eyes were dry. Draft the papers. Which ones? All of them, I said. I want the power of attorney revoked. I want the family trust frozen. I want the company credit cards cancelled, tonight. Catherine, if we cancel the cards while they are at dinner, do it, I cut him off. Let the card decline. Let the waiter tell them. Let them feel the first drop of rain before the storm hits. Arthur nodded slowly. He pulled out his phone. And the house? It's in my name, I said. Robert has a lease agreement we signed 10 years ago for tax purposes. A month-to-month lease. Technically, yes. Issue an eviction notice. Arthur's eyes widened slightly. You want to evict your son? No, I corrected him. I am evicting a delinquent tenant who has embezzled funds and failed to pay rent. I laid my hand on the audit file. It felt cold under my palm. They wanted the inheritance, I whispered. They couldn't wait for me to die. So they started eating the carcass while I was still breathing. I took a deep breath. The oxygen from the nasal cannula felt crisp. Doctor. Alan said, I need surgery to fix my heart, I said. But he was wrong. My heart is fixed. It's made of stone now. I looked at Arthur. Burn it down, Arthur. Burn it all down. The silence in my hospital room was no longer empty. It was heavy. It was suffocating. After I cut off the money, I expected anger. I expected Robert to storm into the lobby, demanding to see me. I expected Jessica to scream over the phone. I was ready for a fight. But I wasn't ready for the poison. It started with the flowers. A bouquet of white lilies arrived on the fourth morning. There was no card from Robert, no apology from Jessica. The card was from the board of directors of a charity I had supported for 15 years. Thinking of you, Catherine. We are so sorry to hear about your declining health. Please know we support Robert's decision to step in during this difficult time. Declining health? Robert's decision. My hands shook as I held the card. The heavy cardstock felt like lead. Then came the texts, not to me but about me. My phone, which had been silent for days, suddenly lit up with notification after notification. But they weren't messages of support. They were probes. Catherine, I heard the news. Is it true you didn't recognize Robert at the party? So sorry, darling. Alzheimer's is a thief. We are praying for you. Don't worry about the committee. Jessica explained everything. Rest your mind. I stared at the screen, my breath catching in my throat. Jessica. She hadn't just stolen my money, she was stealing my mind. She was stealing my history. I realized what had happened. When the credit card declined at dinner, when the humiliation hit them, Jessica didn't panic. She pivoted, she spun a story. She told the world that the billing error wasn't because of theft, it was because Catherine Vance was losing her mind. She's confused, I could imagine her whispering over a martini. She forgets to pay bills. She gets aggressive. We had to take over her accounts to protect her from herself. It was brilliant, and it was evil. It turned my defense into a symptom. My anger became dementia, aggression. My financial crackdown became confusion. I felt the walls of the room closing in. I wanted to scream. I wanted to post on every social media platform that I was sane, that I was sharp, that I was the victim. But who believes the crazy woman when she screams she isn't crazy? The phone rang. It was Margaret. Margaret had been my neighbor for 10 years. We drank tea together on Tuesdays. We shared secrets about our rose gardens. Surely, Margaret would know. I picked up, desperate for a friendly voice. Margaret, I said, my voice thick with relief. Thank God you called. You won't believe what Jessica is saying. Catherine, Margaret's voice was stiff, cold. I think you need to calm down. I froze. Excuse me? I spoke to Jessica this morning, Margaret said. She sounded like she was speaking to a misbehaving child. She was in tears, Catherine. Absolute tears. She told me how you caused a scene at the birthday party. How you drove your car into a wall, because you were confused. That is a lie, I said, gripping the phone tight. Jessica wouldn't let me in. She slammed the door in my face. See. This is what she warned me about, Margaret sighed. A heavy, judgmental sigh. Paranoia. Inventing enemies. Catherine, look at yourself. Robert is trying to run a company. Jessica is trying to maintain the family's reputation. And here you are, freezing their assets? Cutting off your own son? They stole from me, Margaret. $400,000. Oh, stop it, Margaret snapped. Jessica showed me the receipts. She said those were for your medical care and home renovations. She said you forgot you approved them. I felt the blood drain from my face. She showed them receipts? Fake receipts. Or did she just lie with enough conviction that the truth didn't matter? Margaret, I whispered, you've known me for 20 years. Do I sound senile to you? You sound selfish, Catherine, Margaret said. Her voice was like a gavel striking wood. You're old. You have enough money. Why are you making their lives hell? Why are you humiliating Robert? He's your son. Even if you are sick, you shouldn't be cruel. I am not sick. Then that makes it worse, Margaret said icily. If you are sane, then you are just a bitter old woman trying to control everyone from her deathbed. Honestly, Catherine, I expected better from you. Click. She hung up. I lowered the phone. My hand fell onto the white sheet. I looked around the room. It was the same room as 5 minutes ago, but it felt like a prison cell now. I was alone. The physical pain of the accident was nothing compared to this. This was the pain of a soul being erased. I had built a reputation for 40 years. I was Catherine Vance. I was fair. I was generous. I was smart. And in 3 days, a 30-year-old woman with a sharp tongue and no conscience had turned me into a confused, selfish, senile burden. I felt tears hot and stinging in my eyes. Not tears of sadness. Tears of pure, unadulterated frustration. It was a trap. If I stayed silent, the rumor became truth. If I fought back and screamed, I looked like the crazy old woman they claimed I was. I pulled the blanket up to my chin. I felt small. I felt incredibly fragile. The darkness outside the window seemed to seep through the glass, filling the corners of the room. For a moment, I wanted to give up. Maybe Margaret was right. Maybe I should just unlock the accounts. Maybe I should just let them have it. It would be easier. I could just fade away. I could be the nice, quiet, confused grandmother. They would visit me then. They would bring flowers. They would pat my hand and wait for me to die. But then I looked at the folder on the nightstand. The audit report, the rows of numbers, the Ritz-Carlton, Aspen, the Mercedes, those weren't hallucinations, those were facts. And Margaret. Margaret wasn't a friend. A friend asks questions, a friend listens. A friend doesn't believe the wolf just because it's wearing sheep's clothing. I wiped my eyes. The movement was harsh, angry. Immutability. That was the word Arthur used to describe the trust. But nothing is immutable. Not love, not loyalty. And certainly not the truth, if you don't fight for it. I realized something in that dark, lonely room. Being dignified doesn't work when you are fighting in the mud. Silence is not noble. Silence is consent. Jessica thought she had won. She thought that by isolating me, by turning my friends against me, she could force me to surrender. She thought shame would break me. She was wrong. She didn't break me. She just stripped away the last layer of my hesitation. She wanted to play with public opinion? She wanted to use the court of the community to judge me. Fine. I would give her a show. I reached for my phone again. I didn't call Margaret back. I didn't call Robert. I opened the contact for Arthur Sterling. I typed a text message. My fingers were steady now. Arthur. Get the camera footage from the house security system. The front porch, the morning of the accident. And prepare a press release. I hit send. The dark room didn't feel so scary anymore. It felt like a war room. Now, I want to ask you something deeply personal. It hurts to be misunderstood by strangers. But to be slandered by your own family? To have your own daughter-in-law paint you as senile just to cover up her greed. That is a pain that cuts to the bone. Have you ever been in a situation where you wanted to scream the truth, but nobody would listen? Have you ever had your words twisted until you felt like you were the one going crazy? If you know this feeling, the feeling of screaming into a void, please, tell me I am not alone. Leave a comment saying, I've been there, or, I hear you to give me the strength to fight this battle. The presidential suite at the Four Seasons Hotel is quiet. It is a different kind of quiet than the hospital. The hospital was the silence of sickness. This is the silence of strategy. I sat in the high-backed velvet armchair, looking out at the city skyline. My reflection in the glass didn't look like a grandmother recovering from a car accident. I wore a silk blouse, not a hospital gown. My hair was freshly blow-dried. On the mahogany desk in front of me lay two things, a cold glass of sparkling water and an iPad Pro. Are you sure they took the bait? I asked. I touched the Bluetooth earpiece in my ear. Hook, line, and sinker, Arthur Sterling's voice came through, crisp and clear. Robert called my office 10 minutes after the courier dropped off the packet. He didn't ask about your health. He asked how quickly the temporary management authorization could be notarized. I allowed myself a small, dry smile. Good, I said. And the narrative? We stuck to the script, Arthur confirmed. I told him you were overwhelmed. That the accident made you realize you couldn't handle the stress of the estate anymore. I told him you were voluntarily checking into the Sunny Meadows assisted living facility for rest and rehabilitation. And you wanted him to manage the assets while you faded into the background. Sunny Meadows, I mused. Sounds like a place where people go to wait for the end. That's exactly what they think you are doing, Catherine. Giving up, I repeated. Or giving them enough rope. I ended the call. In business, we call this the Trojan horse. You don't break down the enemy's walls with force. That's messy. You offer them a gift. You offer them exactly what they want. And you wait for them to drag it inside their fortress. Robert and Jessica wanted control. They wanted the house. They wanted me out of the way. So, I gave it to them. Or at least, a piece of paper that said I gave it to them. It wasn't signed. It was a draft. But greed has a way of making people blind to the fine print. I swiped the screen of my iPad. 2 weeks. That's how long it had been since the hospital showdown. I had vanished. No calls, no texts, just the lawyer's letter. To them, my silence was surrender. To me, it was camouflage. I opened the smart home app. Robert, for all his claims of being tech-savvy, never understood the infrastructure of the house. He thought the security system was just alarms on the doors. He didn't know about the upgrade William and I installed 3 years ago. High-definition cameras, audio recording capability, cloud storage, and there was only one administrator account. I tapped login. The screen flickered for a second, then split into a grid of 6 live feeds. The living room, the kitchen, the dining hall, the pool deck. It was like looking into a dollhouse. My dollhouse. I saw the activity immediately. The house was buzzing. Caterers in black uniforms were moving furniture. Florists were carrying in massive arrangements of blue hydrangeas, Robert's favorite color, or so he claimed this year. They were throwing a party. Robert's birthday. He hadn't called to invite me. Of course not. Why would you invite the woman you just put in a nursing home? I put on my noise-canceling headphones. The world outside the hotel room disappeared. I was inside the walls of my own home, a ghost haunting the Wi-Fi. I tapped the kitchen feed. The audio crackled, then cleared. Jessica was there. She was holding a clipboard, directing the catering staff. She looked radiant, triumphant. She was wearing a dress that cost more than my first car, and she moved with the swagger of a queen who had just beheaded the competition. No. Jessica's voice came through the headphones, sharp and tinny. Put the champagne tower in the foyer. I want it to be the first thing people see. Yes, Mrs. Vance, a waiter said. Mrs. Vance. The title stung, but I didn't flinch. Robert walked into the frame. He was holding a scotch, even though it was only 2 in the afternoon. He looked relaxed. The tension I had heard on the phone, the fake stress about the merger, was gone. Honey, Robert said, wrapping an arm around Jessica's waist. Sterling said the papers should be finalized by Monday. The old accounts will be linked to my signature. Finally, Jessica sighed, leaning into him. She took a sip of his drink. I was getting so tired of asking for permission like a teenager. It's about time she realized her place. I zoomed in. The camera resolution was incredible. I could see the smudge of lipstick on the glass. Do you think she'll cause a scene? Robert asked, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. If she finds out about the party? Jessica laughed. It was a cruel, melodic sound. Please. She's at a hotel, probably packing her knitting needles for the nursing home. Sterling said she's mentally fragile. She's probably sitting in a rocking chair crying over old photo albums right now. I sat up straighter in my velvet chair. I wasn't crying. I was recording. I tapped the red REC button on the screen. Record. Timestamp. 2:14 p.m. You're right, Robert said, his confidence returning. She had a good run. But the company needs fresh blood. The house needs life. It was like a museum with her in it. A mausoleum, Jessica corrected. She turned to face him, her back to the kitchen island. Look around, Rob. It's ours. No more hiding the good wine. No more listening to her boring stories about hard work and sacrifice. The old hag is finally gone, and this house is officially mine. The old hag is finally gone. This house is officially mine. There it was. The confession. The malice. The absolute lack of gratitude. It wasn't spoken in the heat of an argument. It wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was spoken in cold blood, with a smile. I watched as they kissed, a toast to their victory. I pressed, stop recording. A pop-up window appeared. Save to cloud? I tapped yes. The file uploaded. A little blue bar filled up. 10%, 50%, 100%. Upload complete. I took off the headphones. My heart was beating fast, not from pain, but from adrenaline. It was the same feeling I used to get right before closing a massive deal. The feeling of knowing you have the winning hand, and the other side hasn't even looked at their cards yet. They thought I was the Trojan horse, an empty vessel to be rolled away into a nursing home. They didn't realize the Trojan horse wasn't the victim. It was the weapon. I picked up my glass of sparkling water. The bubbles rose to the surface, sharp and aggressive. "Happy birthday, Robert," I whispered to the empty hotel room. "I got you a gift. I hope you like surprises." I picked up the phone and dialed Arthur. "It's done," I said. "I have the footage, I have the audio. They are throwing the party tonight. Are you ready for phase 2? Arthur asked. I stood up and walked to the closet. I pushed aside the beige cardigans and the sensible wool coats. Hanging in the back was a dress I hadn't worn in 5 years. It was black silk, sharp-shouldered, tailored to perfection. It was a power suit disguised as an evening gown. It was the dress I wore when I rang the bell at the New York Stock Exchange. "I'm not just ready, Arthur," I said, running my hand over the fabric. "I'm overdue. Send the car," I commanded. "I have a party to crash." The printer in the suite's office hummed. Whir. Click. Whir. Click. It was a rhythmic, hypnotic sound. For the last hour, it had been spitting out pages. Hundreds of them. Arthur Sterling stood by the mahogany desk, assembling the binders. There were 3 of them, thick, heavy, black. He didn't look like a lawyer anymore. He looked like a general preparing for a siege. "It's all here, Catherine," Arthur said. He tapped the first binder. The financial audit, the credit card theft, the phantom employees Jessica put on the payroll. I walked over. My hand hovered over the leather cover. "Phantom employees?" I asked. "3 of them," Arthur replied grimly. "Consultants. They've been paid $15,000 a month for the last 2 years. The checks are deposited into an LLC registered to Jessica's maiden name." I felt a cold chill that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. It wasn't just greed, it was fraud. It was methodical, calculated theft. And the company performance? Arthur sighed. He opened the second binder. "The merger Robert lied about? It doesn't exist. He's been falsifying quarterly reports to keep the stock price inflated. If the SEC finds out before we disclose it, he goes to federal prison. Vance Holdings would be liquidated." I stared at the charts. The red lines dipped like scars across the page. My son hadn't just neglected me. He had taken the legacy, my husband, and I built 40 years of blood, sweat, and sleepless nights, and turned it into a Ponzi scheme to fund his wife's wardrobe. "He's not a CEO, I whispered. "He's a child playing with matches in a dynamite factory." "The board is with you," Arthur said. "I spoke to the key stakeholders an hour ago. Once they saw these numbers, they are ready to vote. You have the majority." "Good." I turned away from the desk. The time for analysis was over. The time for action had arrived. I walked into the master bedroom of the suite. On the bed lay the armor I had chosen for battle. For the last 10 years, Catherine Vance had worn beige. I wore cardigans. I wore sensible shoes. I wore soft colors that blended into the wallpaper, trying not to offend, trying not to take up space. I looked at the pile of clothes I had worn to the hospital. The wool sweater, the orthopedic sneakers. I picked them up. They felt light, flimsy, the uniform of a victim. I walked to the trash can and dropped them in. "Goodbye, Catherine the mother." I turned to the bed. The dress was a deep, midnight blue, almost black. It was structured, tailored to within an inch of its life. It wasn't a dress for baking cookies. It was a dress for a boardroom execution. I pulled it on. The silk lining felt cool against my skin. The zipper hissed as I pulled it up, sealing me in. I sat at the vanity. I looked at my face in the mirror. The wrinkles were there, the gray hair was there. But the eyes. The eyes were different. They weren't watery with grief anymore. They were clear, hard. I applied my lipstick, a deep, dark red. War paint. I put on my jewelry. Not the modest pearls I wore to family dinners to avoid making Jessica jealous. I opened the velvet box William gave me for our 30th anniversary. The diamond necklace shone under the hotel lights like cold fire. It was heavy. It felt like a collar of authority. I stepped into my heels. 3 inches. Stilettos. My ankles protested for a moment, then submitted. Pain was irrelevant tonight. I stood up. I looked in the full-length mirror. I didn't see a grandmother. I didn't see a retiree. I saw the woman who had negotiated hostile takeovers in the 90 seconds. I saw the woman who had fired incompetent managers without blinking. I saw the chairman. Arthur. I called out. He stepped into the doorway. He stopped, his eyes widened slightly. He adjusted his tie, standing a little straighter. "The car is downstairs, Mrs. Vance," he said. "Mrs. Vance," I corrected him. "Chairman Vance." The limousine was black, long, silent. It glided through the streets of Greenwich like a shark moving through dark water. I sat in the back, the 3 black binders resting on the seat next to me. They were my weapon, my gavel. I looked out the tinted window. The city lights blurred into streaks of gold and red. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from the security system. Motion detected, Grand Ballroom. I opened the app. The party was in full swing. I saw the crowd, the best of Greenwich society, the mayor, the investors, the fake friends who had texted me about my dementia. They were drinking my wine. They were laughing in my house. I saw Robert. He was standing on a chair, raising a glass. He looked flushed, happy. He thought he had won. He thought the old hag was tucked away in a nursing home, crying over spilled milk. He had no idea that the monster wasn't under his bed. The monster was in a Lincoln town car, 5 minutes away. My heart beat faster, not from fear, but from the sheer, electric anticipation of the drop. It's a specific feeling. It's the feeling of holding the ace of spades when your opponent has gone all in on a pair of 2s. 3 minutes out, ma'am, the driver announced over the intercom. "Thank you, James," I said. I reached out and touched the window glass. It was cold. I thought about the last time I was on that driveway. The cold wind, the slammed door, the cake box sitting on the passenger seat. "Go home, Catherine." I closed my eyes for a second. I let the memory of that humiliation wash over me one last time. I let it fuel me. I wasn't doing this for revenge. Revenge is petty. Revenge is emotional. This was justice. This was a correction. A mother's job is to teach her children. Sometimes, you teach them to walk. Sometimes, you teach them to share. And sometimes, when they have grown into monsters, you have to teach them that actions have consequences. "We are here," James said. The car slowed down. The gravel crunched beneath the tires, a sound I knew better than my own heartbeat. Through the window, I saw the lights of my mansion. It was blazing. Music thumped through the walls. The iron gates were open. Valets were running back and forth. James pulled the limousine right up to the front entrance, blocking the path of the guests who were arriving. He put the car in park. I took a deep breath. I picked up the black binder. I looked at my reflection in the darkened window one last time. "Today," I whispered to the glass, "I will teach them the final lesson." James walked around and opened the door. The night air rushed in. It smelled of expensive perfume and betrayal. I swung my legs out. My stilettos hit the pavement. Clack. I stood up. I smoothed my dress. I lifted my chin. The music was loud. Laughter spilled from the open front door, the same door that had been slammed in my face 2 weeks ago. I walked toward it. I didn't knock. Now, everything is set, the trap is sprung. The evidence is in my hand. The wolf is at the door, but this time, the wolf is me. They are celebrating their victory, unaware that their entire world is about to collapse in the next 10 minutes. Are you ready to see the look on Jessica's face when I walk into that ballroom? Are you ready to see the moment Robert realizes the bank account is closed? I confess, my hands are trembling, not from age, but from the adrenaline of the hunt. If you are eager to see justice served, if you want to walk through those doors with me, comment, "I'm waiting for the result right now." Let's crash this party together. The grand ballroom of the Vance estate was a spectacle. It smelled of white truffles, expensive cologne, and the heavy, intoxicating scent of triumph. 300 guests filled the room. The mayor was there, holding a flute of champagne. The partners from the investment bank were there, loosening their ties. Even Margaret, my judgmental neighbor, was there, laughing at a joke Jessica had just told. I stood in the shadows of the foyer, just outside the double doors. I could see everything through the sliver of the gap. Jessica was holding court in the center of the room. She looked magnificent in a red sequined gown, shimmering like a flame. She had her arm linked through Robert's. "It's been a challenging month," I heard Jessica say. Her voice was projected, practiced, taking over the full management of the estate while caring for. Well, for Catherine in her condition, it hasn't been easy. But Robert has been a rock. "To Robert!" someone shouted. "To Robert!" The crowd echoed. Glasses clinked. Robert beamed. He raised his hand, feigning modesty. "Thank you, everyone. We just want Mom to be comfortable. The facility is the best place for her now. Tonight is about moving forward. About the new era of Vance Holdings." I adjusted the diamond necklace at my throat. It felt cool and heavy. "A new era," I thought. "You have no idea." I pulled my phone from my clutch. The smart home app was open. My thumb hovered over the master override button. I didn't hesitate. I pressed it. Click. Instantly, the crystal chandeliers overhead died. The sconces on the walls went black. The music, a lively jazz number, cut out with a sharp static hiss. The room plunged into total darkness. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped a fork. "Robert?" Jessica's voice was high, edged with panic. "Did we blow a fuse? Where is the staff?" "Stay calm, everyone," Robert shouted. "Just a technical glitch. I'll get the backup generators." Before he could finish, the motorized screen at the far end of the ballroom began to descend. Whir! The sound was loud in the sudden silence. Then, a single beam of light cut through the dark. The projector came to life. But it didn't show a birthday slideshow. It didn't show photos of Robert's childhood. A waveform appeared on the screen, a simple, audio visualizer line. And then, the sound filled the room. It was amplified, booming off the vaulted ceilings. "This is Dr. Allen from Greenwich Hospital. She could die." The crowd went dead silent. The murmurs stopped. Then came the response. Clear, cold, undeniable. "That old woman again? We are in the middle of a party. If she dies, just let us know later." I watched through the crack in the doors. I saw Jessica freeze. Her hand flew to her mouth. The audio cut to a sharp static, then switched. A video feed appeared, grainy, but high definition. It was the kitchen. The timestamp was from this afternoon. Jessica's face filled the giant screen, distorted by the size but unmistakable in its malice. "The old hag is finally gone, and this house is officially mine." Then Robert's voice, laughing. "She was like a museum. The company needs fresh blood." The video froze on that frame, Jessica's sneering face and Robert's arrogant grin looming over the 300 guests. The silence in the room was no longer just quiet. It was physical. It was the sound of air being sucked out of a vacuum. The mayor slowly lowered his glass. Margaret looked at the screen, then at Jessica, her face pale. The projector light was the only illumination in the room. It cast long, ghostly shadows. I signaled the doorman. He was a new hire, loyal to Arthur, not Robert. He threw the double doors open. Bang! The sound echoed like a gunshot. I stepped into the light. I wasn't wearing beige. I wasn't hunched over. I stood 6 feet tall in my heels, the midnight blue dress sculpting a silhouette of pure iron. The diamonds around my neck caught the reflection of the projector beam, scattering shards of light like broken glass. I didn't rush. I walked. Clack, clack, clack. The sound of my stilettos on the marble floor was a metronome counting down to their destruction. The crowd parted. They moved aside instinctively, like waves retreating from a shore. They looked at me with a mixture of horror and awe. I wasn't the senile grandmother they had been told about. I was the ghost returning from the grave to haunt the living. I locked eyes with Robert. He was standing near the stage. His face was the color of ash. His hand was shaking so violently that the champagne in his glass was frothing over the rim. He tried to speak. "Mom?" The word was a squeak. Smash. The glass slipped from his fingers. It hit the floor and exploded. Shards of crystal skittered across the parquet. Champagne soaked into his expensive Italian loafers. I didn't look at the mess. I stepped over it. I walked up the 3 steps to the small stage. I took the microphone from the stand. It felt familiar, solid. I tapped it once. Thump. The sound boomed through the speakers, making a few guests flinch. I looked out at the sea of faces. I saw the investors who had believed the lies. I saw the friends who had pitied me. Finally, I looked at Jessica. She was trembling, her red dress now looking like a costume, cheap and gaudy. She opened her mouth to say something, perhaps another lie, perhaps an excuse. "Don't," I said. My voice was calm, amplified, filling every corner of the room. "You have spoken enough, Jessica. Tonight, you listen." I turned my gaze to Robert. He looked small. He looked like a boy who had broken a vase, not a man who ran a company. "You told them I was confused," I said. The microphone caught every nuance of my tone, the disappointment, the resolve. "You told them I was in a nursing home. You told them I was gone." I let the silence hang for a beat. "I am not gone, Robert. I was simply auditing." A ripple of whispers went through the room. The word auditing struck fear into the hearts of the business partners standing in the back. "I built this house," I continued, sweeping my hand toward the high ceiling. "I built the company that paid for that suit you are wearing. I built the reputation that brought these people here tonight." I took a step closer to him, "And for 20 years, I let you pretend it was yours. Because I thought a mother's job was to give until she had nothing left." I paused. I looked at the screen behind me, where his face was still frozen in that arrogant laugh. I was wrong. Arthur Sterling stepped out from the shadows near the stage. He handed me a blue folder. The color matched my dress perfectly. I opened it. "This is not a birthday card, Robert," I said. I pulled out the document. I held it up. The light hit the bold black letters at the top. "I, Catherine Vance, sole owner of Vance Holdings and this estate, hereby remove Robert Vance from his position as CEO for incompetence, embezzlement, and ethical misconduct." The gasp from the crowd was audible. It was a collective intake of breath. "Effective immediately," I added, my voice cutting like a razor. "Your access to the company accounts has been revoked, your corporate cards have been cancelled, and your authority is zero." Robert's knees buckled. He actually stumbled back, catching himself on the edge of the DJ booth. "Mom, please," he wheezed. "Not here. Not in front of everyone." "Why not?" I asked coldly. "You were happy to humiliate me in front of everyone when you thought I was helpless. You were happy to let me die on a stretcher while you toasted to your own success." I turned to the guests. "The party is over," I announced. "Please finish your drinks." "But the hosts are leaving." I looked at Jessica. Her mascara was running. The facade was gone. "You said you wanted the house, Jessica?" I asked. She nodded dumbly, tears streaming down her face. "You can have the memories," I said. "But the keys? Those belong to me." I dropped the microphone. It didn't screech. It hit the floor with a heavy, final thud. I turned my back on them. I didn't need to see them crumble. I could hear it. I could feel the shift in the air. The power had returned to its rightful owner. I walked down the steps. The crowd parted again, but this time, they didn't look away. They looked at me with respect, with fear. Arthur was waiting for me at the bottom of the stairs. He offered me his arm. "Shall we, Madam Chairman?" I took his arm. "Yes, Arthur," I said, loud enough for Robert to hear. "Call the security team. I want the trash taken out." The microphone was still rolling on the floor. It settled with a final, hollow thud that signaled the end of the show. For a second, the room was paralyzed. The elite of Greenwich stared at me, then at Robert, unsure of the protocol for witnessing a public execution. Then, the scream tore through the silence. "You witch! You can't do this!" It was Jessica. The shock had worn off, replaced by the primal panic of an animal cornered in a trap. She lunged toward the stairs, her red dress tangling around her legs, her face twisted into a mask of pure fury. "This is my house!" she shrieked, clawing at the air. "I planned this party. I invited these people. You are just a senile old." She never reached me. Two men in dark suits, Arthur's private security detail, stepped out from the wings. They didn't run. They moved with the heavy, inevitable momentum of a falling wall. One of them blocked her path. He didn't touch her. He simply stood there, a mountain of silence. "Step back, Mrs. Vance," the guard said. His voice was low, professional, and terrifying. "Get out of my way." Jessica spat, trying to push past him. "Robert, do something. She's ruining everything." I turned slowly at the bottom of the stairs. I looked at Robert. He was still leaning against the DJ booth, his face pale and slick with sweat. He looked at his wife, then at me, then at the security guards. He did nothing. He was frozen by the realization that his golden parachute had just turned into an anchor. Arthur Sterling stepped forward, holding his phone. He pressed a button on the screen. "The accounts are locked," Arthur announced. He didn't shout, but in the acoustic perfection of the ballroom, his voice carried, "The credit cards are dead. The corporate assets are frozen." As if on cue, the head of the catering company, a man named Pierre who had served this family for a decade, walked up to Robert. He held a wireless payment terminal. It was beeping aggressively. "Mr. Vance," Pierre said, his French accent clipped and cold. "The card on file, it has declined. For the deposit, and the final balance. $30,000. "Try it again," Robert stammered, patting his pockets for a wallet that was now useless. It's a glitch. Try the Amex." "I tried the Amex, sir. And the Visa. And the corporate MasterCard," Pierre said, loud enough for the mayor to hear. "All declined. Stolen or lost, the machine says." Pierre looked at me. I nodded once. "Pack it up," Pierre shouted to his staff. "The bar is closed. The kitchen is closed. We are leaving." The waiters stopped pouring champagne. They started clearing the glasses, snatching them out of guests' hands if necessary. The music was gone. The food was being covered with foil. The guests began to scatter. It was a stampede of silk and tuxedos. No one said goodbye to Robert. No one looked at Jessica. They just wanted to escape the stench of failure. I stood in the center of the room, unmoving. I was the eye of the hurricane. "Mom." Robert stepped off the stage. He walked toward me, hands trembling. "Mom, you made your point, okay? You scared us. Good joke. Now tell Arthur to unlock the cards. Pierre is leaving. This is embarrassing." I looked at him. I really looked at him. He wasn't worried about the betrayal. He wasn't worried about my feelings. He was worried about being embarrassed in front of the caterer. "It is not a joke, Robert," I said. "But, where are we supposed to go?" he asked, his voice cracking. "You can't kick us out. We have rights. We have tenancy laws." Arthur stepped in. "Actually, you don't. The lease agreement you signed was for a guest occupant status, contingent on employment at Vance Holdings. Since your employment was terminated 5 minutes ago, your residency is also terminated." Arthur checked his watch. "You have 1 hour," Arthur said, "to pack your personal effects, only personal items. No art, no electronics purchased with company funds. No jewelry listed on the insurance rider." 1 hour. Jessica screamed. "I have 3 closets full of clothes." "Then I suggest you start folding," I said. The hour passed in a blur of chaos. I sat in the library, sipping a cup of tea. I could hear the sounds from upstairs, suitcases being dragged across hardwood floors, muffled shouting, the sound of things breaking. I didn't go up there. I didn't need to supervise. Arthur's team was watching every move, ensuring they didn't loot the silver on their way out. At 11 p.m., the front door opened. I walked to the foyer. Robert and Jessica stood there. They looked like refugees from a fashion show. They were dragging 4 Louis Vuitton suitcases, the only ones that fit in the Uber they had been forced to call because Arthur had confiscated the keys to the company Porsche and the Range Rover. Jessica's makeup was smeared. She wasn't screaming anymore. She was sobbing, a jagged, ugly sound. Robert looked at me. He looked at the house. "You can't do this," he whispered. "We're family. Family protects each other, Robert," I said softly. "You preyed on me. I'm your son. And I am your mother," I replied. "Which is why I am doing this. You need to learn how to survive without a trust fund. It is the only gift I have left to give you." I pointed to the door. "Get out." They walked out into the cold night air. The Uber driver, a confused young man in a Honda Civic, popped the trunk. It was too small for their luggage. They had to jam the bags into the back seat, sitting awkwardly with suitcases on their laps. I watched the Honda taillights fade down the driveway. Arthur stood beside me. "Change the locks," I said. "And change the alarm codes." "Already done," Arthur replied. 72 hours later. The legal machinery was swift and merciless. Arthur's team had filed the motions at dawn the next day. The temporary restraining orders were granted. The forensic audit was submitted to the district attorney, pending charges for embezzlement. Robert and Jessica were staying at a budget motel on the outskirts of town. I knew this because the bill for their cell phones, which were still on the family plan for one more day, showed the location. I was in the garden, pruning the roses. It was therapeutic. Cutting away the dead wood so the new buds could bloom, the intercom at the main gate buzzed. I walked to the control panel on the stone pillar. I pressed the video button. It was Robert. He was alone. He was wearing the same suit he had worn at the party, but it was wrinkled now. His tie was gone. He hadn't shaved in 3 days. "Mom?" His voice came through the speaker, tinny and distorted. "Mom, please. Let me in." I stared at the screen. "Mom." "Jessica left me," he sobbed. "She took the jewelry she hid in her purse and left this morning. She said I was a loser. She said she's filing for divorce." I felt a twinge of pain. Not for me, but for him. He was finding out the hard way that his wife loved his wallet, not his soul. "I have nowhere to go," Robert cried. He fell to his knees on the concrete outside the gate. I could see him through the iron bars. He gripped the metal, his knuckles white. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'll do anything. I'll work in the mailroom, just, please. Don't leave me out here." He looked so small. He looked like the little boy who used to scrape his knee and come running to me for a bandage. Every instinct in my body, the biological imperative of a mother, screamed at me to push the green button. Open the gate, let him in, feed him, fix him. But I looked at my hands. They were scarred from the accident. I remembered the hospital room, the empty chair, the golf game, the lies. If I opened that gate, I wouldn't be saving him. I would be enabling him. I would be teaching him that betrayal has no cost. That mommy will always clean up the mess. He needed to hit the bottom. He needed to break completely so he could rebuild himself as a man, not a leech. "I cannot open the gate, Robert," I said into the intercom. "Mom!" he wailed. "Please. I love you. I love you too," I whispered, my voice trembling. "I love you enough to let you grow up." I looked at him one last time. His forehead was pressed against the cold iron bars, shaking with sobs. It was a pathetic, heartbreaking sight. I felt pity. Deep, wrenching pity. But I did not feel guilt. I reached out and pressed the end call button. Then, I pressed the lock button. The heavy deadbolt of the iron gate slid into place with a sound like a hammer hitting an anvil. It was the sound of a border closing. Inside, there was silence. There was dignity. There was the smell of roses and the peace of a house that finally belonged to its owner. Outside, there was only the weeping of a man who had traded a kingdom for a fool's gold, and realized too late that the refund period had expired. I turned my back on the gate. I walked back toward the house, my shoes clicking on the stone path. I didn't look back. The sun was setting, casting a long golden light over the estate. It was going to be a cold night, but for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of the dark. 6 months. It has been 180 days since the lights went out in the ballroom of the Vance estate. I am sitting on the terrace of a small, private villa in Santa Barbara. The ocean air here is different from Greenwich. It doesn't smell of old money and cold winters. It smells of salt, sage, and something that feels remarkably like freedom. I put down my paintbrush. The canvas in front of me is a mess of blues and greens, an amateur attempt at capturing the Pacific coastline. It's not a masterpiece. It wouldn't sell for $1. But that doesn't matter. I am painting because I want to. Not because it's a charity auction item. Not because it fits the decor. Just because. A waiter approaches. He is young, smiling. "More iced tea, Mrs. Vance?" "Yes, please, David. And extra lemon." I lean back in the wicker chair. Arthur calls me every Friday at 10 a.m. sharp. He gives me the weekly briefing. It used to be about stocks and dividends. Now, it's about the fallout. The news about Jessica didn't surprise me. She filed for divorce exactly 3 weeks after the eviction. When she realized Robert wasn't hiding a secret offshore account, when she realized he really was just a man with a suspended license and a pile of debt, she vanished. Arthur tells me she's in Miami now. She's dating a real estate developer twice her age. I don't feel anger when I hear that. I feel a strange sense of relief. She is someone else's problem now. The parasite has found a new host. And Robert. I look at the small wooden table next to me. There is a letter sitting there. It arrived yesterday. The envelope is plain, cheap white paper. The handwriting is familiar, though it looks shakier than I remember. There is no return address. I didn't open it immediately. The old Catherine would have ripped it open, desperate for connection. The new Catherine finished her tea first. I pick it up now. I unfold the single sheet of lined notebook paper. Mom. It reads, I am working at a logistics warehouse in New Jersey. It's hard work. My back hurts every day. I rent a room above a garage. It's cold. I pause. My thumb traces the ink. I don't have the Porsche anymore. I take the bus. And on the bus, I have a lot of time to think. I thought I deserved the world just because I was your son. I thought the money was magic. I didn't know you had to bleed for it. I am bleeding for it now, Mom. For every dollar. I'm not asking for money. Please don't send any. I just wanted you to know that I finally paid for my own electricity bill yesterday. It was only $40. But I paid it. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I actually owned the light when I turned it on. I'm sorry. I hope one day I can earn the right to see you again. Robert. I read the letter twice. There is no request for a wire transfer. No blame shifted to Jessica. No excuses. Just a man, standing in the wreckage of his life, picking up a brick, and starting to build. I fold the letter carefully. Do I want to call him? Yes. A part of me, the mother part, wants to send a car, pick him up, and bring him here to the sunshine. But I don't reach for the phone. If I save him now, I rob him of his victory. He is finally learning the lesson I should have taught him 20 years ago. The pain in his back from the warehouse job? That is the growing pain of character. I open the drawer of the table and place the letter inside. It lies on top of the others. Perhaps, in a year or two, when the stack is high enough. Perhaps then I will invite him for coffee. But not today. I stand up and walk to the railing. Below me, the waves crash against the rocks. I have other work to do. This afternoon, I am meeting with the hospital board, not as a patient, but as a donor. We are breaking ground on the Vance Trauma Center. It will be run by Dr. Alan Sterling. It will save lives. It will be a legacy that actually means something. I am also funding a scholarship. It is for single mothers who want to start their own businesses, women who have grit, but no capital. I want to give the ladder to people who are willing to climb it, not people who wait for an elevator. I take a deep breath. The air is crisp. My chest doesn't hurt anymore. The ribs have healed. The heart has healed. I spent my life thinking that love meant sacrifice. I thought that to be a good mother, I had to be a candle, burning myself out to give light to others. But a candle that burns out leaves everyone in the dark. I look at the sun rising over the water. It is bright. It is unapologetic. It shines, not by burning out, but by being a star. I tap the railing with my fingernails, short, unpolished, practical, for anyone listening to my story. For anyone who feels like they are disappearing inside their own family. Listen to me. I love my son. I will always love him. But I finally learned that I must love my own dignity more. Money is a tool. It can be a wonderful servant, building hospitals and securing peace. But if you let it rule your relationships, it is a terrible master. And respect? Respect is not something you beg for. You cannot ask for it. You cannot buy it. Respect is something you hold in your hand. It is the ability to say no. It is the ability to close a gate. It is the ability to walk away from a table where you are being served scraps. I turn my face to the sun. I close my eyes. I am Catherine Vance. I am alone. And for the first time in my life, I am whole. The story you just heard has had its names and locations changed to protect the identities of those involved. We're not sharing this to judge anyone, but in the hope that someone out there will pause and reflect. How many mothers are silently suffering in their own homes? Honestly, I wonder. If you were in my shoes, what would you do? Would you stay quiet to keep the peace, or would you speak up and fight to reclaim your voice? I'd really love to hear your thoughts on this story from my channel, or any feedback you have that could help us make our content even better. God always blesses the brave, and I truly believe courage leads us toward better days. For now, I'm leaving 2 of the most loved stories from our channel on the end screen. I think they'll surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this very moment. If this story touched your heart, please hit like, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss what's coming next.